The sterile scent of antiseptic fought a losing battle against the metallic tang of fear. Every rhythmic beep of the heart monitor above Shirley Overbay's head was a countdown. At 34 weeks, her body had declared war on itself, and the 3 tiny lives within her were caught in the crossfire. Miles away, under the warm Californian sun, the man who had put them there, her husband, Clyde McCormick, was smiling for the cameras. He stood at a pristine altar, champagne flute in hand, lifting a toast to his new bride. As Shirley's world dissolved into a cacophony of urgent medical commands, the live stream on a nearby nurse's phone showed Clyde slipping a diamond ring onto another woman's finger. One wife was fighting for 4 lives, the other was sealing a merger. And in that moment, the universe narrowed to a single, searing truth. She was utterly, devastatingly alone. The pain was a living thing, a predator with claws sunk deep into Shirley's abdomen. It came in waves, each one more ferocious than the last, stealing her breath and blurring the edges of the brightly lit hospital room. Between the crests of agony, fragmented memories surfaced like debris from a shipwreck. Clyde's face, once the architecture of her world, now seemed like a stranger's mask. The cool dismissal in his eyes a week ago when she'd shown him the sonogram pictures. "We'll have the nannies handle it, Shirley. I'm in the middle of the Apex merger. This is a critical time." The way he'd started sleeping in the guest wing of their sterile, glass-walled penthouse, citing late-night calls and early meetings. "Blood pressure is 180 over 110. A calm but firm voice cut through her haze. "We're looking at severe preeclampsia with Hell-P syndrome. Her liver enzymes are through the roof." Shirley's mind, though clouded by pain and magnesium sulfate, grasped the terrifying words. She had researched everything. Preeclampsia, a betrayal of the body, where the very system meant to nurture life turns toxic. She tried to focus on the doctor's face, a kind woman with tired eyes. "My babies!" she rasped, her tongue thick and heavy. "Are they?" "They're in distress, Shirley. We need to perform an emergency C-section, right now." As they prepped her, a flurry of motion and hushed efficiency, a junior nurse glanced at her phone, her thumb scrolling through a social media feed. Shirley caught a glimpse of it. A sun-drenched garden, a cascade of white roses, and Clyde. He was radiant, dressed in a custom Tom Ford suit, his arm possessively around a stunning woman in a designer wedding gown. The caption read, "Tech Titan Clyde McCormick weds McCormick Industries PR VP, Isabella Vance, in a surprise ceremony." The image burned itself onto her retinas. It wasn't just an affair. It was a public execution of their marriage, their life, their family. He wasn't just leaving her. He was replacing her, erasing her, while she was at her most vulnerable, carrying his children. The betrayal was so absolute, so audacious, it transcended pain and became a cold, clarifying venom. He had left her to die. "Shirley, we need you to consent," the doctor said gently, her voice pulling Shirley back from the abyss. "The stress on your system is critical. We have to prioritize one. Your life, or the baby's. A choice. An impossible, monstrous choice." Looking at the worried faces around her, Shirley saw her answer with stark, unwavering certainty. Her life had been a gilded cage, a beautiful lie. But the lives inside her, they were the only truth left. They were her legacy, her rebellion, her everything. "Them," she whispered, the word a prayer and a command. "Save them." Miles away, at the opulent McCormick Vineyard estate, Clyde McCormick adjusted his cufflinks and smiled. The smile didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were scanning the crowd, calculating. Each guest was a chess piece, a venture capitalist to be courted, a politician to be influenced, a journalist to be charmed. His bride, Isabella Vance, was the perfect queen for his board, beautiful, ambitious, and publicly loyal. Their union wasn't about love. It was a strategic consolidation of power, a PR masterpiece designed to project stability and family values ahead of his company's controversial IPO. Shirley had become inconvenient. Her high-risk pregnancy, her emotional needs, her gentle nature, they were liabilities in his world of ruthless expansion. She was a relic from a past version of himself he no longer recognized or required. "To my beautiful wife, Isabella," he said, his voice echoing across the manicured lawn. "The future is ours." The crowd erupted in applause. As he leaned in to kiss his new bride, his phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from his assistant. "Emergency at the hospital. Shirley is in surgery." He silenced the phone, his smile never faltering. The timing was unfortunate, but manageable. He would finish this performance first. The show, after all, must go on. Back in the operating room, as the surgeon made the first incision, Shirley Overbay closed her eyes. She wasn't thinking of the man who had shattered her heart. She was thinking of 3 tiny, perfect faces she had yet to see. And as the darkness began to swallow her whole, a single, furious presence burst through the hospital doors. It was her best friend, her lawyer, her sister, in all but blood. Bonnie Jensen had arrived. Bonnie Jensen moved through the hospital corridor like a storm front, her sharp legal mind already cataloguing every potential violation, every injustice. She'd gotten the call from a frantic nurse, a friend of a friend, and had broken every speed limit getting here from her downtown office. The sight of Shirley, pale and surrounded by the grim machinery of life support, being wheeled into the OR, solidified her fear into cold, hard rage. She caught Shirley's hand just before they pushed her through the double doors. "Shirley, I'm here. What's happening?" Shirley's eyes fluttered open, finding Bonnie's face in the blur. There was no time for explanations, only for a final, desperate plea. "He's getting married," she choked out, a tear escaping. "Bonnie, the babies, promise me, you protect them." Her grip was surprisingly strong, a final surge of maternal will. "Save them, not me. Save my babies." "I promise, Shirley, I promise," Bonnie whispered, her own voice thick with emotion. She held onto her hand until the door swung shut, leaving her alone in the silent, echoing hallway. That promise was now a sacred contract, sealed in the face of death. The next hour was an eternity. Bonnie paced, her mind a whirlwind of legal strategies and frantic prayers. She learned the names from a compassionate doctor. 2 boys and a girl. They were born within a minute of each other, impossibly small, their cries weak but defiant. Elias, Owen, and Maya. They were whisked away to the neonatal intensive care unit, each in their own transparent box, fighting for every breath. But Shirley had crashed on the table, a massive hemorrhage. They had pumped dozens of units of blood into her, but she had slipped into a coma. Her body had won the battle for her children, but the cost was her consciousness. It was then that Clyde McCormick finally made his entrance. He strode in, his wedding suit still immaculate, the scent of expensive champagne and Isabella's perfume clinging to him. He had composed his face into a mask of tragic concern, a performance he'd no doubt rehearsed in the car. "My God," he said, his voice a low, theatrical murmur. "My wife. My children." The medical staff, unaware of the morning's betrayal, offered him hushed condolences. But Bonnie saw right through him. She stepped forward, blocking his path to the ICU waiting area. "You're late," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. Clyde's mask flickered. "I came as soon as I could. I was in a crucial meeting." "A meeting?" Bonnie's laugh was a sharp, ugly sound. I saw the pictures, Clyde. So did Shirley, right before they put her under. White roses, wasn't it? Very tasteful. The blood drained from his face. He quickly regained his composure, shifting into the corporate bully she knew so well. This is a private family matter, Bonnie. You have no right to be here. I have every right, she shot back, her eyes like chips of ice. Shirley made a promise to me, and I made one to her. She knew you were a monster, and she knew you'd do this. You stand here, playing the grieving husband, while the woman carrying your 3 children nearly died alone because you were busy committing bigamy in all but name. Now listen here, he hissed, taking a step closer, his voice dropping to a threat. You will not cause a scene. My reputation, your reputation? Bonnie's fury, which she had been holding in a tight, professional grip, finally snapped. To hell with your reputation. You don't get to come in here and play the hero. You don't get to stand vigil. You don't get to use this tragedy as another one of your PR stunts. You gave up the right to call her your wife the second you put that ring on another woman's finger. He stared at her, his expression a mixture of shock and cold fury. For the first time, Clyde McCormick, the man who controlled boardrooms and bent markets to his will, was facing an obstacle he couldn't buy, bully or dismiss. Get out of my way, he commanded. No, Bonnie said, planting her feet. You won't go near her. And you won't go near those babies. As of this moment, you are nothing to them. I will make sure of it. The war began not with a bang, but with the rustle of legal paper. The day after the surgery, Clyde arrived at the hospital, flanked by 2 shark-like lawyers from a top-tier firm. They came to assert his rights as Shirley's husband and the father of her children. They were met by Bonnie Jensen, who stood as an immovable object, armed with a document that rendered them powerless. This, Bonnie said, sliding a folder across the table in a sterile hospital conference room, is a durable power of attorney for health care and a comprehensive legal guardianship designation for any and all children, signed and notarized by Shirley Overbay 3 months ago. It names me Bonnie Jensen as her sole medical proxy and the legal guardian of her children in the event of her incapacitation. Clyde's jaw tightened. He remembered the day Shirley had asked him to sign it with her. She'd called it responsible planning. He'd dismissed it, telling her to have his assistant handle the boring paperwork. He never imagined she'd had the foresight to create one that gave her friend, not him, ultimate control. This is absurd, his lawyer blustered. We will contest this. As her husband, a husband who was publicly marrying another woman while she was fighting for her life, Bonnie countered, her voice lethally calm. I can't imagine a judge in the country who wouldn't see that as a profound conflict of interest. You are barred from making any medical decisions. You are barred from seeing her. You are barred from the NICU without my express permission, which I assure you, you will never have. Defeated for the moment, Clyde and his team retreated. Bonnie knew it was a temporary victory. He would come at her with his billions, tying her up in court for years if he had to. She needed more than a defensive document. She needed a weapon. That afternoon, she went to the penthouse. The air was cold and unnaturally still, already feeling less like a home and more like a museum exhibit. Clyde's things were everywhere, but Shirley's presence was fading, packed away. Bonnie went to their shared library, her heart aching. She remembered a conversation with Shirley months ago, her friend's voice quiet and fearful over a cup of tea. He's changed, Bon, Shirley had said. It's not just work, it's a coldness. He looks at me like I'm a line item on a balance sheet. Sometimes I think, if something happens to me, he'll just write me off. I made a little insurance policy. A rainy day file. Bonnie's eyes scanned the shelves, filled with first editions Clyde had bought for show. But Shirley's books were different, well-worn paperbacks, classics she read and reread. Her gaze landed on a faded copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, Shirley's favorite. On instinct, she pulled it from the shelf. It was too light. The inside had been hollowed out. Nestled within was a small, sleek USB drive, silver and cold to the touch. It was labeled with a single, elegant word: Nightingale. Beneath it lay a folded piece of stationery, sealed with wax. Bonnie's hands trembled as she opened it. It was a letter from Shirley. My dearest Bonnie, if you are reading this, then my worst fears have come true. I am gone, or silenced, and the man I married has shown his true face. I pray for our children, and I pray you are there to protect them. I can no longer be the gentle, forgiving woman he expects me to be. That woman cannot protect our babies from their own father. Clyde is not just a cheat. He is a criminal. He has built his empire on secrets and illegalities, and I couldn't live with myself if I didn't create a record of it. This drive is my witness. I call it the Nightingale Project, because it's about the song that deserves to be heard in the dark. It contains everything: his real ledgers, his hidden partners, his methods. It is the truth. I don't know what to ask of you. To go to the authorities seems too simple. He owns people. He would bury it, and he would bury you. But I cannot let him win. I cannot let him raise our children with his soulless ambition, turning them into pawns in his game. So I ask you for the impossible. Avenge me. Avenge the life he stole from us. Protect our children by destroying the monster who created them. Burn his kingdom to the ground, Bonnie. For Elias, for Owen, for Maya. Be the mother lion I can no longer be. All my love, forever, Shirley. Tears streamed down Bonnie's face, hot and silent. The grief was a physical weight, but beneath it, a new feeling began to solidify. Resolve. This was no longer just a legal battle. It was a righteous war. She clutched the USB drive in her hand. It felt heavier than a stone, weighted with secrets, and a dying woman's last wish. She went back to her office, plugged the drive into her encrypted laptop, and a single password prompt appeared on the screen. Enter passphrase. Below it, a hint: the place our real story began. The place our real story began. Bonnie stared at the screen, her mind racing through years of memories with Shirley. It wasn't the lavish restaurant where Clyde had proposed, nor the gallery where they'd first met. Those were part of his story, the one he manufactured for public consumption. Their real story, Bonnie and Shirley's, began long before Clyde was in the picture. It began in a cramped, dusty coffee shop near their law school campus, a place filled with the smell of burnt coffee and old books, where they'd spent countless nights outlining their futures on napkins. She typed it in. The Daily Grind. Access granted. The screen populated with folders, a labyrinth of corporate malfeasance, so vast it took her breath away. It was a ghost ledger of McCormick Industries, detailing crimes that were as cold-blooded as they were complex. Stock manipulation schemes that had bankrupted smaller competitors. Illegal data mining from users of his company's ubiquitous social media app, ConnectSphere, packaged and sold to political operatives. A web of offshore shell corporations in the Cayman Islands used to launder money and evade billions in taxes. Shirley, the quiet, unassuming art historian, had been a silent witness. She had meticulously downloaded emails, copied server logs, and recorded incriminating phone calls. The centerpiece was a file named Project Nightingale. It was the code name for the most heinous operation, a secret partnership with a defense contractor to use ConnectSphere's data to profile and target dissidents in foreign countries, a service for which McCormick Industries was paid handsomely by shadowy government agencies. Bonnie felt a chill crawl up her spine. This was bigger than marital betrayal. This was a conspiracy that affected millions. Shirley was right. Taking this to the FBI or the SEC would be a gamble. Clyde's influence ran deep. He'd use his army of lawyers to tie it up in procedural knots, discrediting Shirley as a scorned wife, until the evidence was buried and the story went cold. No, justice here required a different kind of court, the court of public opinion, backed by the inescapable jaws of multiple federal agencies closing in at once. She needed a specialist, someone who operated in the grey spaces she couldn't. She made a call on a burner phone. "Marco, it's Bonnie Jensen. I need a ghost." Marco Spectre Diaz was a legend in the digital underground, a grey-hat hacker with a fierce anti-corporate ideology. Bonnie had successfully defended him pro bono years ago on a minor charge, earning his respect and a single cryptic promise. "If you ever need to burn down a giant, you have my number." They met in a noisy, crowded subway station, the perfect place to be anonymous. Marco was unassuming, a man who could easily blend into any crowd, but his eyes were preternaturally sharp. Bonnie explained the situation, omitting personal details, and handed him a cloned copy of the drive. He listened intently, a flicker of something like admiration in his eyes. "Your friend was methodical," he said after a long silence. "This isn't just data. It's a kill shot. The feds will sit on it," Bonnie said. "I need it to explode, not fizzle out." "A multi-front assault," Marco mused, his fingers tapping an invisible keyboard on his thigh. "You don't just give it to one journalist. That's containable. You give different pieces to different sharks, all at the same time. You create chaos." The plan formed between them in the roar of passing trains. It was audacious, dangerous, and brilliant. They would dissect Project Nightingale into 3 distinct packages. Package 1: the stock manipulation and insider trading evidence. This would go to a famously tenacious investigative reporter at the Wall Street Journal. This would attack his wealth. Package 2: the illegal data mining and political targeting. This would be leaked to a powerful U.S. senator on the Senate Intelligence Committee, a known political rival of the people Clyde was in bed with. This would attack his power. Package 3: the tax evasion and money laundering, the most concrete financial crimes. This would be sent directly and anonymously to a special task force within the IRS and the Securities and Exchange Commission. This would attack his freedom. "We time the drops to be within hours of each other," Marco explained. "He won't know which fire to put out first. While his PR team is trying to debunk the financial story, the political scandal will hit. While he's dealing with a congressional subpoena, the feds will be quietly building their airtight case. He'll be surrounded." "And the grand finale?" Bonnie asked. Marco smiled, a rare and unsettling sight. "Oh, for that, we need to wait for him to get on the biggest stage he can find. And when he's there, we don't just pull the rug out from under him. We demolish the entire building." That night, from a secure, anonymous terminal, Bonnie sent the first encrypted email. The first domino had been pushed. The controlled demolition of Clyde McCormick had begun. The first story hit like a surgical strike. The Wall Street Journal published a meticulously sourced exposé detailing how McCormick Industries had engaged in a pump-and-dump scheme with its own stock ahead of a major acquisition. McCormick stock, set for its IPO, faltered in pre-market trading. Clyde's PR machine went into overdrive, dismissing the article as baseless slander from disgruntled former employees. Clyde himself appeared on a business news network, his face a mask of calm indignation, calling it a desperate attack by his competitors. Then, 48 hours later, the second bomb detonated. The office of Senator Thompson issued a press release announcing a formal inquiry into ConnectSphere's data privacy practices, citing credible and alarming evidence of user data being exploited for political purposes. The news sent shockwaves through the tech world. The hashtag also Delete ConnectSphere began trending worldwide. Clyde was no longer calm. He was a caged tiger, roaring down the phone at his lawyers, his lobbyists, his PR team. The world he had built with absolute control was splintering, and he couldn't find the source of the attack. Isabella Vance, his new bride, watched from the sidelines of their hollow marriage. The grand romance she had been sold was a sham. Her life was a series of photo ops and public appearances, playing the part of the adoring, supportive wife. Behind closed doors, Clyde was volatile, paranoid, and utterly dismissive of her. She was not a partner, she was an accessory, a beautiful lamp he'd acquired to furnish his life. Her disillusionment curdled into fear one night when she overheard him on a hushed, frantic call in his study. "No, the assets have to be liquid," he snarled into the phone. "Move it all to the Zurich account, all of it, and confirm the flight plan for the Gulf Stream. Just one passenger. I'll leave from the private airstrip. No, she's not coming. She's a loose end." A loose end. The word struck Isabella with the force of a physical blow. He was preparing an escape route, a golden parachute for one. He was going to drain his assets and flee, leaving her behind to face the fallout, the public humiliation, the lawsuits, the wreckage of his imploding empire. She had helped him betray Shirley, believing she was securing her own future. Now she saw the truth. She was just the next liability to be discarded. Her survival instinct, as sharp and polished as her diamonds, took over. The hurt and betrayal hardened instantly into cold, calculated fury. If he was going to treat her like a loose end, she would become the knot that hanged him. She began to move with quiet purpose. While he was consumed by his crisis, she used her knowledge of his habits, his passwords, the ones he'd arrogantly thought she was too stupid to notice, to access his personal server. She copied everything, his private emails, his personal ledgers, and the one thing she knew the public would understand better than complex financial crimes: audio recordings. Clyde had an ego-driven habit of recording his calls, a trove of unfiltered megalomania. She found the smoking gun, a call with his offshore banker, explicitly discussing the plan to hide his assets and abandon the country. "Shirley's kids might inherit a bankrupt company, but I'll be damned if they get a penny of my personal fortune," he'd laughed. Isabella downloaded the file, her hands steady. She felt no remorse. This was not about justice for Shirley. This was about survival for Isabella. She contacted Bonnie Jensen's law firm through an encrypted messaging app, identifying herself only as a gilded cage. "I have the final nail for Clyde McCormick's coffin," she wrote. "I will provide it to you on 2 conditions: full immunity from any prosecution and a $10 million settlement from the frozen assets. It's the severance package he should have offered me." Bonnie sat in her office, reading the message on her screen. A slow, grim smile spread across her face. The Viper was turning on its master. The final piece of the puzzle had just clicked into place. The Future Forward Tech Summit in San Francisco was the Vatican of the digital age, and the keynote address was its high mass. In a desperate final gamble to control the narrative, Clyde McCormick had refused to cancel his appearance. He intended to walk onto that stage in front of the most powerful people in his industry and project an aura of unbreakable confidence. He would paint himself as a visionary under attack, a martyr for innovation. The auditorium was electric with tension. Every journalist, investor, and rival CEO was in attendance, hungry for the spectacle. Clyde, looking pale but defiant in a dark, tailored suit, walked to the center of the stage to a smattering of polite, uncertain applause. Bonnie and Marco were not in the audience. They were in a nondescript van parked 2 blocks away, a mobile command center of monitors and servers. Marco had used Isabella's intel to exploit a backdoor in the summit's AV system. He had total control. "He's on," Marco said, his fingers flying across his keyboard. "Showtime." On stage, Clyde began his speech. "In times of turbulence," he said, his voice resonating with forced sincerity, "the true test of leadership is not to avoid the storm, but to steer the ship directly into it, guided by the North Star of integrity." Behind him, the massive screen designed to display corporate logos and inspirational graphics flickered. The McCormick Industries logo dissolved, replaced by a Swiss bank statement. A transfer of 500 million tlahuels dated 2 days prior. Clyde, unaware, continued. "We believe in total transparency." The screen changed again, now showing the damning email chain about Project Nightingale, with key phrases like illegal data exploitation and plausible deniability highlighted in red. A murmur rippled through the audience. People began pointing, pulling out their phones. Clyde's practiced smile faltered. He sensed the shift in the room's energy and glanced over his shoulder. He froze. Then came the audio. His own voice, amplified through the auditorium's state-of-the-art sound system, cold and clear. "Shirley's kids might inherit a bankrupt company, but I'll be damned if they get a penny of my personal fortune." The collective gasp was sharp and audible. The laughter that followed the quote on the recording filled the vast hall with a sickening echo. Clyde's face, projected 20 feet high, went from ashen white to a blotchy, furious red. His empire had not just crumbled. It had been publicly, humiliatingly, and irrevocably annihilated in front of the entire world. He stood speechless, a king dethroned in his own court. At that moment, the main doors of the auditorium burst open. A group of stern-faced men and women in dark suits strode down the center aisle. "FBI, Clyde McCormick," the lead agent said, his voice calm but absolute, not even bothering to ascend the stage. "You are under arrest for securities fraud, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and money laundering." The flash of cameras was blinding, a brutal, relentless strobe effect capturing his utter humiliation. As they cuffed his hands behind his back, his eyes frantically scanned the crowd, searching for an enemy he could name. But he saw only a sea of phones, recording his downfall. The market for McCormick Industries stock, open for after-hours trading, flatlined, and then entered a catastrophic freefall. From the back of the auditorium, cloaked in shadow, Isabella Vance watched for a moment, a thin, triumphant smile on her lips. Then she slipped out a side door, a ghost disappearing into the chaos she had helped create. In the van, Bonnie watched the live feed, her face illuminated by the glow of the monitor. There was no joy, no triumph, only a profound, heavy sense of an obligation fulfilled. She took out her phone, her thumb hovering for a moment before she sent a simple, 3-word text to the head nurse on Shirley's floor. "Tell her it's done." The atmosphere in the hospital's quiet wing had changed. Whispers followed the nurses down the halls. The news was on every television, the story of Clyde McCormick's spectacular downfall playing on a continuous loop. There was a palpable sense of cosmic justice in the air, a feeling that a great wrong had been righted. Bonnie sat by Shirley's bedside, holding her still, pale hand. For weeks, this room had been a place of silent, anxious waiting. But today, the silence felt different. It felt peaceful, hopeful. She was gently stroking Shirley's hand when she saw it. A flicker, the barest tremor of an eyelid. Then a soft, breathy groan. Bonnie shot to her feet, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Shirley," slowly, as if rising from the depths of a long, dark ocean. Shirley Overbay's eyes opened. They were hazy, unfocused, but they were open. She blinked, trying to make sense of the room, of the tube in her throat, of the woman weeping silently beside her. Her lips moved, but only a dry, rasping sound emerged. A doctor and nurse rushed in. There was a flurry of gentle activity, tests of her responsiveness, and finally, the careful removal of the breathing tube. Bonnie held a cup of water with a straw to her friend's lips. After a few sips, Shirley's voice returned, a fragile whisper that was the most beautiful sound Bonnie had ever heard. "The babies?" It was her first question, her only question. Tears streaming freely now, Bonnie smiled. "They're alive, Shirley. They're fighters. All three of them. Elias, Owen, and Maya. They're small, but they're perfect." Over the next few hours, Bonnie gently recounted the story. She told Shirley about Project Nightingale, about the takedown, about the arrest on stage. She told her that Clyde was gone, his assets frozen, his name disgraced. Shirley listened, her expression unreadable, her energy focused solely on absorbing the facts. She didn't react to the news of Clyde's fate, her mind already past him, focused on the only thing that mattered. Later that day, the nurses agreed she was stable enough for a visit. As they wheeled her down the corridor to the NICU, Shirley's heart pounded with a feeling that dwarfed everything she had ever experienced. Fear, betrayal, love, all of it. The NICU was a hushed, sacred space, filled with the soft beeping of monitors and the quiet hum of incubators. A nurse led her to a corner where 3 tiny, transparent boxes stood side by side. And there they were, her children. So impossibly small, a tangle of wires and tubes attached to their tiny bodies. But they were breathing. They were real. Elias had a shock of dark hair. Owen had a determined frown, even in sleep. And Maya had long, delicate fingers. Reaching out a trembling hand, Shirley laid her palm flat against the smooth, warm plastic of Elias's incubator. Through the barrier, she could feel the life, the warmth, the miracle she had fought for. This was the victory. This was the reason for everything. The tears that fell were not of sorrow for what she had lost, but of profound, overwhelming gratitude for what she had saved. Her revenge was not Clyde's downfall. It was this. It was the fierce, unyielding, life-giving love for the 3 souls before her. Her true story was just beginning. The journey of Shirley Overbay is a testament to the quiet strength that lies beneath the surface and the ferocious power of a mother's love. Her story, and the unwavering loyalty of her friend Bonnie, proves that even the most formidable empires of deceit can be brought down by the force of truth. They turned betrayal into a weapon, pain into a strategy, and fought not for revenge, but for the future of 3 innocent lives. Clyde McCormick built a kingdom of lies, but he forgot that the most powerful force in the universe is a promise made to a child. If this story of resilience, friendship, and ultimate justice moved you, please hit the like button and share it with someone who needs a reminder that courage can change the world. Don't forget to subscribe for more tales of triumph against the odds. What part of Shirley's fight inspired you the most? Let us know in the comments below. What happens when a single cruel comment in a 5-star restaurant echoes into the sterile silence of a billion-dollar boardroom? We've all felt the sting of being misjudged, of being made to feel small by someone who holds all the cards. But this isn't just a story about an insult. It's a story about the moment the tables don't just turn, they flip with the force of a hurricane. It's about the shattering collision of assumption and reality, where the person you dismiss today might just hold your entire future in their hands tomorrow. This is the story of Mirabel Kowalski, a waitress whose accent was mocked, and the day the man whose girlfriend mocked her had to beg for her approval. The ambient hum of Ethelgard was a carefully orchestrated symphony of quiet wealth. It was the sound of heavy silver cutlery kissing porcelain, the gentle slosh of a $2,000 Bordeaux being poured into a crystal glass, and the murmur of conversations that could shift stock prices or dissolve marriages. For the patrons, it was an escape. For Mirabel Kowalski, it was the front line. At 26, Mirabel moved through this world with a grace that belied the ache in her feet and the weight of her reality. She wore the restaurant's uniform, a tailored black dress, simple but elegant, like a suit of armor. Her dark hair was always pulled back in a severe, immaculate bun, and her focus was absolute. She could anticipate a diner's need for more water from across the room, describe the notes of a pouilly fuissé, with unfeigned expertise, and balance 3 sizzling plates on one arm, without a tremor. She was, by all accounts, an exemplary waitress. But there was one thing she couldn't hide. One part of her that didn't fit the polished aesthetic of Ethelgard, her accent. It was thick, unapologetically Polish, a melody of rolling R's and softened vowels that was a legacy of her childhood in Gdansk. She had arrived in New York with her parents at 16, full of dreams that the city had a way of grinding into dust. Her father's construction business had collapsed after a bad partnership, and a subsequent stroke had left him needing constant care. Her mother, a proud woman who once taught literature, now worked cleaning houses to make ends meet. Mirabel, meanwhile, was a ghost in her own life. By day, she was a final-year student at NYU, pursuing a double major in business administration and computer science on a patchwork of scholarships and loans. Her professors saw a quiet, intensely brilliant student who rarely spoke but consistently topped every exam. By night, she worked at Ethelgard, the punishingly long shifts and generous tips, the only thing keeping her family afloat and paying for her father's mounting medical bills. Her real life, the one that burned inside her, happened in the stolen hours between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. Hunched over her laptop in their cramped Queen's apartment, the rhythmic click of her keyboard, a secret language of ambition. Tonight was a Tuesday, typically a slower evening, but Table 7 was an island of noise and entitlement in the calm sea of the dining room. It was the domain of Richard Davenport. Even people who didn't follow the tech world knew the name. Davenport Innovations had revolutionized data security with its Aegis protocol, making Richard a billionaire before his 30th birthday. He was handsome in a way that seemed almost unfair. Sharp jaw, thoughtful brown eyes, and an easy confidence that came from never having heard the word no. He was a regular, and usually a pleasant one. Distracted always on his phone, but polite. The problem wasn't Richard. The problem was his companion, Tiffany Hayes. Tiffany was a creature of Instagram, a meticulously curated collection of angles and filters. Her fame was built on showcasing a life of effortless luxury, a life entirely funded by Richard. Tonight she was holding court with 2 other women who were carbon copies of herself, all sharp, contouring lip filler, and the vacant, predatory boredom of those who have everything and value nothing. And then he had the audacity to say the lighting was unflattering for the photo Tiffany was saying, her voice a shrill instrument of complaint. I was like, "Babe, it's a helicopter. The lighting is what it is." Her friends laughed, a sound like tiny, sharp bells. Richard offered a faint, distracted smile, his thumb scrolling endlessly on his phone. Mirabel approached the table with the water pitcher. "More water, sir, ma'am," she asked, her voice low and professional. Tiffany didn't look at her. She just waved a dismissive hand, a Cartier bracelet jangling on her wrist. "We're ready to order." Finally. Mirabelle stood patiently, pen and notepad in hand. She had learned long ago not to let the casual cruelty of her customers pierce her armor. She was a professional. This was a transaction. The friends ordered quickly salads, appetizers, a flurry of modifications. Then it was Tiffany's turn. She scanned the wine list, her brow furrowed in concentration, as if she were deciphering ancient scripture. "We'll start with a bottle of the Sauve." She stumbled, her perfectly manicured finger tapping the menu. "The Sauvignon Blanc." She pronounced it with a hard, flat G and an anglicized blank. "An excellent choice, ma'am." Mirabelle said, her professionalism unwavering. "The 2022 from Sancerre is particularly crisp this season." She pronounced it correctly, softly, without a hint of correction in her tone, Sauvignon Blanc. It was a tiny thing, a breath of air. But to Tiffany, it was a challenge. Her head snapped up, her blue eyes narrowing. It was the first time she had made direct eye contact with Mirabelle all evening. A slow, mocking smile spread across her glossed lips. "Oh, listen to that," Tiffany said, looking at her friends, her voice dripping with condescension. "Where did they find you, sweetheart?" "Fresh off the boat from—" "Where is it?" "Boratistan." Her friends giggled. Richard finally looked up from his phone, a flicker of discomfort in his eyes. He saw Mirabelle standing ramrod straight, her face a pale, impassive mask. He saw Tiffany preening from her cheap shot. He should have said something. A simple "Tiffany, don't be rude" would have sufficed. But he hated confrontation, especially public confrontation. He just offered a weak, apologetic grimace in Mirabelle's direction and looked back down at his screen, effectively siding with his girlfriend through his silence. The silence was his sin, and it was a sin Mirabelle would not forget. Tiffany, emboldened, leaned forward. "Say it again for me." She cooed, her voice a weapon. "Say Sauvignon Blanc." She mimicked a thick, cartoonish Eastern European accent, turning the elegant French words into a clumsy, ugly sound. Sauvignon Blanc. The two friends howled with laughter, this time loud enough to turn heads at the neighboring tables. The meticulously crafted hum of Ethelgard had been broken. For a moment, Mirabelle felt the heat rise in her cheeks, the familiar, sickening shame of being singled out for being different. She could feel the stares of the other diners. She wanted the floor to swallow her whole. But then something else took over. A cold, hard resolve that had been forged in the fires of her family's struggles. She thought of her father's frail hands, her mother's chapped knuckles, her own sleepless nights filled with code. These people with their casual cruelty and unearned fortunes knew nothing of strength. She met Tiffany's mocking gaze directly. Her own eyes, a deep, intelligent grey, were steady. She did not raise her voice. She did not tremble. "It is pronounced Sauvignon Blanc," she said, her Polish accent suddenly sounding not like a flaw, but like a statement. It was clear, precise, and utterly devoid of emotion. "Is there anything else I can get for you?" The confidence, the sheer refusal to be cowed, stunned Tiffany into silence. The laughter from her friends died in their throats. They had expected tears or a flustered retreat. They didn't know what to do with this quiet, unshakable dignity. Tiffany scoffed, trying to regain control. "Whatever. Just bring the wine." Mirabelle gave a single, sharp nod. "Of course." She turned and walked away, her back perfectly straight. She didn't rush. She didn't falter. She moved with the same measured grace as before, but now it felt different. It was the grace of a queen retreating from a peasant's squabble. As she entered the controlled chaos of the kitchen, she allowed herself one deep, shuddering breath. The chef, a burly man named Antoine, who missed nothing, gave her a sympathetic look. "Let me guess. Table 7. Mirabelle just nodded, retrieving a wine bucket. "Don't let them get to you, ma chérie," he said gruffly. "Their money can't buy class." Mirabelle managed a small, tight smile. "I know." But as she chilled the bottle and polished the glasses, the scene replayed in her mind. It wasn't just Tiffany's overt cruelty that stung. It was Richard Davenport's silence, his tacit approval. He, a titan of industry, a man lauded for his brilliant mind, had sat there and let it happen. He had looked at her, seen her humiliation, and chosen to do nothing. She finished her shift in a haze of cold fury. The hours crawled by. When she finally clocked out at 1:30 a.m., she didn't take the subway. She walked the 50 blocks back to Queens, the cold night air doing little to cool the fire in her chest. Each step was a promise to herself. One day, they would not see a waitress. They would not hear an accent. They would only see her power. She let herself into the quiet apartment. Her mother was asleep in a chair by her father's bed. Mirabelle gently placed a blanket over her. She looked at her father, his face peaceful in sleep, and felt a surge of fierce protective love. This was why she endured it. For them. But it was also for herself. She sat down at her desk, the city lights twinkling outside her window. She opened her laptop. The screen illuminated her face, her expression now hard and determined. On the screen was a complex web of code, a revolutionary logistics algorithm she had named Nightingale. It was designed to optimize supply chains by prioritizing ethical sourcing and environmental sustainability without sacrificing efficiency. It was brilliant, it was groundbreaking, and it was almost finished. For months, she had been sending out her business proposal to venture capital firms, getting nothing but automated rejections. They saw a student from Queens with no track record and didn't bother to read past the first page. But 2 weeks ago, one had responded. A boutique firm called Horizon Ventures, run by a legendary, notoriously tough investor named Catherine Albright. They had asked for more data. Then a technical demonstration. Then a meeting. The meeting was tomorrow. Wednesday. At 10 a.m. She checked the location on the calendar invitation one last time, a bitter smile touching her lips. Location Davenport Innovations. 45th floor boardroom. She closed her eyes. She could still hear Tiffany's mocking voice. Sauvignon Blanc. She could still see Richard Davenport's averted gaze. Tomorrow he would look at her. Tomorrow he would have no choice. Richard Davenport lived in a penthouse that felt less like a home and more like a modern art museum. It was a cavern of glass chrome and white marble overlooking Central Park, a sterile testament to his success. And tonight, it felt like a prison. After leaving Ethelgard, the mood in the car had been tense. Tiffany, sensing his disapproval, had launched into a defensive tirade. "Oh, don't give me that look, Richie," she'd said, reapplying her lipstick in the vanity mirror. "It was a joke. She needs to lighten up. It's not my fault she can't speak English properly. Her English is perfect, Tiff." "She has an accent," Richard had replied, his voice flat. He kept his eyes on the blur of city lights, the image of the waitress's dignified, hurt face seared into his mind. Accent can't speak English, same thing. She's a waitress, Her job is to be agreeable. If she's so sensitive, maybe she should get a different job. He didn't argue further. He knew it was pointless. Arguing with Tiffany was like punching water. It was exhausting, and you never made an impact. He'd met her at a charity gala 6 months ago. She was beautiful, vivacious, and utterly uncomplicated. She was a distraction, an easy and attractive accessory to his demanding life. He hadn't been looking for a partner. He'd been looking for a reprieve. Now he was beginning to realize that her lack of complication was a symptom of a profound lack of depth, a hollowness that her beauty could no longer conceal. His silence at the restaurant gnawed at him. He told himself he'd avoided a scene, that it was the pragmatic choice. But he knew better. It was cowardice. He who could face down hostile boards and ruthless competitors had flinched from correcting his girlfriend's playground cruelty. He had failed a basic test of character, and the knowledge left a sour taste in his mouth. He went to bed long after Tiffany had fallen asleep, but sleep wouldn't come. He kept thinking about the look in the waitress's eyes. It wasn't just hurt. It was recognition, as if she had seen him exactly for what he was, in that moment weak. He finally drifted off into a restless sleep, his last thought being a vague hope that he would never see her again, if only to escape the reminder of his own failure. Meanwhile, in a small apartment in Queens, Mirabelle Kowalski was preparing for war. She slept for exactly 2 hours, a disciplined, necessary shutdown of her mind and body. She woke at 4 a.m., the city still cloaked in darkness. The first thing she did was check on her parents. Her mother was now asleep in her own bed. Mirabelle adjusted her father's pillows and checked his vitals monitor, the soft, steady beep, a familiar comfort. She whispered, "Dzień dobry, tato." Good morning, Dad, a ritual she never missed. Then she began her transformation. She showered, letting the hot water wash away the grime of the restaurant and the lingering humiliation of the night. She chose her outfit with the precision of a general selecting his uniform. It wasn't expensive, a simple charcoal grey pantsuit she'd bought at a consignment shop and had tailored to fit her perfectly. Underneath a crisp white silk blouse, her mother had given her one of the few nice things they'd managed to keep from their old life. She pulled her dark hair not into a waitress's bun, but into a low, elegant chignon. Her makeup was minimal, designed to enhance, not conceal. A touch of concealer for the dark circles under her eyes, a sweep of mascara to define her sharp gaze, and a neutral shade on her lips. When she looked in the mirror, the person staring back was not Mirabelle the waitress. It was Maya Kowalska, founder and CEO of Nightingale. The accent was still part of her, but today it would be a mark of her unique perspective, not a target for mockery. She spent the next few hours running through her presentation one last time, her laptop open on the small kitchen table. The algorithm was her masterpiece. Nightingale didn't just find the cheapest or fastest route for a supply chain. It cross-referenced data from dozens of sources, NGO reports on labor practices, satellite imagery, tracking deforestation, real-time carbon emissions data, and used machine learning to create logistical pathways that were not only efficient, but certifiably ethical and sustainable. For a major corporation, it was a PR dream, a shield against scandal, and as her financial models showed a source of long-term profitability in a world increasingly conscious of corporate responsibility. At 8:30 a.m., she kissed her sleeping mother's forehead and slipped out of the apartment. She took the subway, her briefcase clutched in her hand. She stood amongst the throng of mourning commuters, invisible, just another face in the crowd. But inside, she was a supernova ready to explode. Catherine Albright was already in the Davenport Innovations lobby when Mirabelle arrived at 9:45 a.m. Catherine was in her late 50s with a severe silver bob and eyes that could dissect a balance sheet from 50 paces. She was wearing a blood-red Armani suit, a splash of predatory color in the building's monochromatic lobby. She was a legend in the VC world, known for her brutal honesty and her uncanny ability to spot talent where no one else was looking. "Maya," she said, her voice crisp. She never used the anglicized Mirabelle. "You're punctual. I like that. It suggests you respect other people's time." "Good morning, Miss Albright," Mirabelle said, her voice steady. "Nervous." Focused, Mirabelle corrected gently. Catherine's thin lips curved into a rare smile. "Good. Remember what I told you. You don't need them. They need you." Davenport's company has taken a beating in the press over the last year for their suppliers in Southeast Asia. Child labor allegations. Environmental corners cut. Their stock is solid, but their brand is vulnerable. Nightingale isn't just a piece of software for them. It's absolution. You are not asking for a handout. You are selling the cure. Mirabelle nodded, the words reinforcing her own resolve. "They don't know who you are," Catherine continued as they walked toward the exclusive elevators for the upper floors. "My office just referred to you as the project lead. They think they're meeting some seasoned veteran I poached from a rival. Let them think that. Walk in there, own the room, and don't give them an inch. Understood?" "Understood, Ms. Albright." The elevator ride to the 45th floor was silent. Mirabelle could feel the pressure change in her ears. She was ascending quite literally into a different world. The doors opened onto a reception area that was more gallery than office. A massive abstract sculpture dominated the center, and the walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a godlike view of Manhattan. A sleek receptionist led them to the boardroom. "Mr. Davenport will be with you in a moment. He's just finishing a call." The boardroom was an intimidating space. A vast, dark wood table sat polished to a mirror shine, surrounded by 20 leather chairs. One entire wall was a screen. The view from the windows was breathtaking, designed to remind any visitor of the sheer scale of the power wielded within these walls. Catherine and Mirabelle took their seats, setting up their laptops. They were a team of two, facing what would likely be a full retinue of Davenport's top brass. A few minutes later, 3 men in expensive suits entered. They introduced themselves as the COO, CFO, and Chief Legal Officer. They were polite but dismissive, their eyes constantly flicking towards the door waiting for their boss. Then the door opened, and Richard Davenport walked in. He looked tired. He was loosening his tie, speaking to his assistant as he entered. "Just push the Tokyo call to 5, and get me coffee, a large black coffee." He turned to the table, a professional, welcoming smile already forming on his face. "Catherine, it's great to see you. I've heard incredible things from my team about this Project Nightingale. We're very excited to finally meet the genius behind it." His eyes scanned the table. He nodded at Catherine, and then his gaze moved to the poised, professional woman sitting beside her. And his world stopped. Time seemed to slow down. His professional smile froze, then melted away, replaced by a look of utter slack-jawed disbelief. The blood drained from his face. It was her. The waitress. The woman with the Polish accent. The woman his girlfriend had humiliated last night. The woman whose humiliation he had silently condoned. She was here, in his boardroom. wearing a suit that looked more commanding on her than his own did on him. Her hair was different, her expression was different, but there was no mistake. It was her. The same steady, intelligent grey eyes that had met Tiffany's mockery with unshakable dignity were now looking at him across his own boardroom table. Mirabelle held his gaze. She did not smile. She did not smirk. Her expression was perfectly, terrifyingly neutral. She offered no flicker of recognition, no sign that she had ever seen him before in her life. It was a power move of such exquisite subtlety that it knocked the air from his lungs. Catherine Albright, oblivious to the personal drama unfolding, seized the moment. "Richard, gentlemen," she said, her voice cutting through the thick tension only Richard could feel. "Allow me to introduce the founder and architect of the Nightingale platform, Miss Maya Kowalski." Richard's COO, a man named Bob, stood up to shake her hand. "Ms. Kowalski, a pleasure." Mirabelle stood and shook his hand firmly. "The pleasure is mine, Mr. Peterson." Richard remained frozen in place, his mind a frantic, screaming mess. Waitress, accent, Tiffany. Oh God, he felt a wave of nausea. This couldn't be happening. It was some bizarre, stress-induced hallucination. But it was very, very real. Catherine was looking at him, an eyebrow slightly raised at his stunned silence. He had to say something. He had to function. He cleared his throat, the sound unnaturally loud in the quiet room. "Ms. Kowalski," he managed to say, his voice strained. "Welcome to Davenport Innovations." Mirabelle finally turned her full attention to him. She gave him a small, polite, and utterly impersonal nod. "Mr. Davenport," she said, her voice calm and clear. Her Polish accent was still there, the same accent from last night. But in this context, in this room, coming from this woman in a power suit who was being presented as a genius, it sounded different. It sounded authoritative, exotic, powerful. "Thank you for taking the time to meet with us," she said. He felt like he had been punched in the gut. She was acting as if they were complete strangers. The cold professional courtesy was 1,000 times more damning than any accusation would have been. She was showing him in no uncertain terms just how insignificant their previous encounter was to her. She had already moved on. She was here to do business, and he was just another client. He sank into his chair at the head of the table, his mind reeling. His carefully ordered world had just been turned upside down, and the person who had done it was now coolly opening her laptop, ready to decide his company's future. The presentation began, but for Richard, the first 10 minutes were a silent movie played against the screaming soundtrack of his own shame. His mind was a feedback loop of panic. The waitress, the accent, Tiffany's mocking voice. My silence. He stared at Mirabelle, but he wasn't seeing a poised executive. He was seeing the ghost of his own cowardice from the night before. His team, however, was captivated. They knew nothing of the drama. They simply saw Maya Kowalski take command of the room. She spoke with an unhurried, deliberate confidence. She didn't try to mask her Polish accent. She owned it. In the sterile, powerful context of the boardroom, it sounded not like a flaw, but like a mark of distinction. She began not with financials, but with a foundational truth. Every product on every shelf has a hidden history. She said, her voice resonating with a quiet passion as an image of a deforested landscape filled the screen behind her. A history of materials, sourced hands that touched it and fuel that was burned to bring it to us. For decades, that history has been a black box deliberately obscured for the sake of profit. We are told that ethics are expensive and sustainability is inefficient. This is the foundational lie of modern logistics. She clicked to the next slide, a complex, elegant web of data points blooming on the screen. Nightingale changes that paradigm. My algorithm doesn't just track products, it tracks provenance. It doesn't just optimize for speed, it optimizes for integrity. Using a proprietary blend of blockchain verification, real-time satellite monitoring, and cross-referenced NGO data, Nightingale provides a single immutable score for any given supply route. We call it the Integrity Index. Richard's COO, Bob Peterson, leaned forward, his initial air of dismissal evaporating. Are you saying you can actually quantify corporate responsibility in real time? I'm saying I can give you a dashboard that will tell you with 99.8% accuracy if a subcontractor 3 levels down your supply chain is using child labor before it becomes a headline in the New York Times. Mirabelle stated, her gaze sweeping across the executives. The platform will then automatically suggest alternative pathways that maintain your integrity index above a preset threshold, while minimizing the impact on delivery time and cost. The CFO, a hawk-eyed man named Gerald, jumped in his tone, skeptical. That sounds impossibly ambitious. And expensive. What's the cost of integration? Mirabelle turned to him, a flicker of a smile on her lips. This was a question she was born to answer. The cost of integration is approximately 1/5 the average cost of a brand reputation crisis. However, our models project a 15% increase in long-term profitability for early adopters through 3 main avenues. She held up her fingers. 1. Premiumization. The ability to market your products as Nightingale certified allows for a higher price point. 2. Risk mitigation. You will virtually eliminate the risk of costly scandals and boycotts. And 3. Investor confidence. In a market pivoting hard towards ESG metrics, having the highest integrity index in your industry makes you a magnet for capital. It was at that moment Richard finally snapped out of his personal hell. He was a businessman above all else, and what he was hearing was not just brilliant, it was revolutionary. He had spent the last year in damage control over a supplier scandal. This woman, Ms. Kowalski, wasn't just offering a solution, she was offering a fortress. He looked at the flawless logic of her financial models, the sheer genius of her technical architecture. The woman he had dismissed as a simple waitress was a visionary. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. His judgment had been so catastrophically, insultingly wrong. He had looked at her and seen a uniform and an accent. He had been as blind and as shallow as Tiffany. The final part of the presentation was a live demonstration. Mirabelle pulled up a hypothetical company and with a few clicks ran the Nightingale analysis. Red flags popped up across the map. Labor abuses, environmental violations. Then she clicked one more button. The algorithm whirred, and in a stunning visual display, the logistical map reconfigured itself. Red lines turned green as new ethical suppliers and cleaner shipping routes were phased in. A new streamlined and profoundly ethical supply chain emerged. A stunned silence fell over the boardroom. Bob Peterson let out a low whistle. "My God," he whispered. "This is the Holy Grail." Catherine Albright, who had been watching with immense satisfaction, sat back in her chair. "Richard, gentlemen," she said, smoothly, seizing the moment. "We are presenting you with an opportunity. Maya is the sole owner of the Nightingale IP. Horizon Ventures is providing the seed capital. We are offering Davenport Innovations the chance to be our foundational client and a minority stakeholder. We believe a 10% equity stake in Nightingale in exchange for a $30 million capital injection would be a suitable arrangement. The room buzzed. 30 million was significant, but for 10% of something this groundbreaking, it was a steal. Richard knew it. Catherine had deliberately underpriced it to spark a fire. We would obviously need to perform our due diligence, Richard said, the words automatic, the standard corporate dance. Of course, Mirabelle said coolly, a masterful touch of nonchalance in her voice. All our data is available for your team to review. We are, however, speaking with 2 other firms in the tech logistics space next week. One of them is in Seattle. The unspoken name hung in the air, Amazon. It was a perfect bluff, whether it was true or not. She was creating urgency. She was in complete control. The meeting concluded with promises of swift follow-ups. Richard's team was electrified, already talking about synergy and market disruption. He insisted on walking Catherine and Mirabelle to the elevators personally. The chatter of his executives faded down the hall, leaving the 3 of them in the grand, silent reception area. Catherine Ms. Kowalski. Thank you for coming in, Richard said formally. The pleasure was ours. Richard, Catherine replied, giving him a sharp look. We'll await your term sheet. She stepped into the arriving elevator. Maya, I'll meet you downstairs. The doors began to close, leaving Richard and Mirabelle alone for a few excruciating seconds. The professional facade between them felt paper-thin. This was his chance. He had to say something. Listen, Ms. Kowalski. Mirabelle. He started, his voice low and desperate. About last night, at the restaurant. Mirabelle looked at him. Her face a mask of impenetrable calm. Another elevator pinged open for her. She turned to face him fully, her quiet voice cutting through his fumbling words. Miss Davenport, she said, the tone formal, but the message deeply personal. Last night I was your waitress. Today I am a potential business partner. I expect to be treated with the appropriate professional courtesy in both situations. You failed in the first. I trust you will not fail in the second. She didn't wait for a reply. She stepped into her elevator, her back straight, her head held high. Just before the doors slid shut, she delivered her final devastating assessment, her voice soft, but the words landing like daggers. What your girlfriend said, what you allowed her to say. It was ugly, and it was ignorant, but it has no bearing on this deal. My work speaks for itself. She paused, her cool grey eyes locking onto his. The question you need to ask yourself, Mr. Davenport, is whether your character does. The doors closed, leaving him standing alone in the echoing silence of his marble palace, the reflection of his own shocked face staring back at him from the polished steel. He had never felt so small in his entire life. The moment the elevator doors closed, Mirabelle leaned against the cool metal wall and let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for 24 hours. The adrenaline that had fueled her began to recede, leaving a profound, bone-deep weariness in its wake. She had done it. She had faced the dragon in his own lair and walked away unscorched. Catherine Albright was waiting for her in the lobby, a rare, genuine smile gracing her features. She held out a hand. You, Maya Kowalski, were magnificent. Mirabelle shook it, a real smile finally breaking through her own composure. He was shocked. Shocked is an understatement, Catherine said, her sharp eyes glinting with amusement. I haven't seen a man that powerful look, that utterly neutered, since I foreclosed on a Swiss bank. There's a story there, isn't there? Mirabelle considered for a moment, the memory of Tiffany's sneer flashing in her mind. Let's just say, Mr. Davenport was given a practical lesson in not judging a book by its cover. Catherine nodded, sensing there was more, but having the grace not to press. Well, the hook is set. Deep. They'll send a term sheet by the end of the day. They can't afford not to. Now comes the hard part, negotiation. Go home. Get some sleep. My team will handle the initial volley. We celebrate tonight. Mirabelle felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in years. Thank you, Catherine, for believing in me. Don't thank me, Catherine replied, her expression turning serious. I believe in profit. Your genius is going to make us both very, very rich. Now go. You've earned a moment of peace. The subway ride back to Queens was surreal. The world outside the train window was unchanged, but Mirabelle's world had been irrevocably altered. She wasn't just a waitress and a student anymore. She was a founder, an innovator, a woman who had made a billionaire squirm. Her final words to him had been unplanned, a raw and honest response to his fumbling apology. She had spoken her truth, and it had felt more powerful than any business pitch. Up on the 45th floor, Richard Davenport was not at peace. He had walked back into the boardroom in a daze, where his team was buzzing with the predatory excitement of sharks that smell blood. The valuation Albright proposed is frankly an insult, Gerald the CFO was saying gleefully. To them, I mean. We should move to acquire the entire company, offer $50 million for 80%. Lock it down before anyone else gets a sniff. Richard stared at them, their words barely registering. He was 1,000,000 miles away, his mind caught on a single damning sentence. The question you need to ask yourself, Mr. Davenport, is whether your character does. Shut up, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. The excited chatter died instantly. 3 pairs of eyes turned to him, baffled. Sir, his COO asked. Everyone just be quiet for a minute, Richard said, rubbing his temples. He walked to the vast window and stared out at the city. But he wasn't seeing the view. He was seeing a highlight reel of his own moral compromises. His relationship with Tiffany was the most glaring. He had tolerated her shallowness, excused her casual cruelty, enabled her entitlement, all because it was easy. And last night, that ease had come at the expense of another person's dignity. A person who, it turned out, possessed more intelligence, resilience, and character than Tiffany had in her entire curated existence. Mirabelle's final words hadn't just been an indictment. They had been a mirror. And he was disgusted by the reflection. He turned back to the room, a new, unfamiliar resolve etched on his face. Gerald, he commanded, draw up a new term sheet. 40 million for a 20% stake. Gerald's jaw dropped. 40 for 20. Sir, that's double the valuation she offered. We have all the leverage here. We have no leverage when we're dealing with someone we should be profoundly grateful to. Richard snapped back. And add a $5 million grant, no strings attached, for the Nightingale Foundation. The what? Bob, the COO, asked. She didn't mention a foundation. She will. Richard said with absolute certainty. A woman like that doesn't build something this revolutionary just for the money. The grant is non-negotiable. It's a sign of good faith. I want to partner with her, not fleece her. Bob, get our best tech team on her code. I want them to be thorough, but I also want them to be deferential. Treat her intellectual property like the crown jewels. Is that clear? Yes, sir, they chorused, stunned by the seismic shift in their boss's demeanor. Now get out, he said, his tone softening. I have a personal matter to attend to. Alone in the sterile quiet of his office, Richard sat behind his massive desk, a symbol of a power that now felt hollow. He knew what he had to do. It was a long overdue amputation. He picked up his phone and called Tiffany. She answered with a bubbly, self-absorbed lilt. Richie, I was just about to text you. I saw the most divine little Birkin and Tiffany. We need to talk, he cut in his voice, flat and cold. Her tone shifted instantly. What's wrong? You sound weird. I'm ending it, he said, tearing the bandage off in one clean motion. I'm ending things between us. There was a beat of stunned silence, then a sharp, incredulous laugh. What is this about last night? Don't be so dramatic. It was just some stupid waitress. No, Richard said, his voice hardening. She wasn't just some stupid waitress. Her name is Maya Kowalski, and she is the founder of a tech company that I am about to invest $40 million into. She was in my boardroom this morning. The silence on the other end was absolute heavy, with the sound of a world view collapsing. That's impossible, she finally stammered. She's a liar, a con artist. She's trying to trick you, Richie. The only person who has been dishonest is me. Richard confessed, the words tasting like ash. By pretending that this relationship was something it wasn't. By pretending I didn't see your cruelty. Last night wasn't an isolated incident, Tiff. It was just the first time I was forced to really look at it. And it made me look at myself. I don't like the person I am with you. The person you are with me, she shrieked, her voice pitching high with panic and fury. I made you relevant. Before me, you were just some boring tech nerd. I got you on magazine covers. You got me into parties, he corrected calmly. She is getting my company into the future. There's a difference. So that's it. You're dumping me for some immigrant waitress with a funny accent. The words were meant as a final venomous insult, but they landed with pathetic desperation. I'm dumping you because you mocked that woman's accent, Richard said, his voice laced with ice. And because I sat there and let you. It's over, Tiffany. My assistant will arrange to have your things sent over. Have a good life. He hung up before she could unleash the scream he knew was coming. He then pulled out a sheet of his personal stationery. An email wouldn't suffice. This required more. He began to write not as a CEO to a potential partner, but as a man offering an unvarnished apology to a woman he had wronged. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He just hoped to prove that her words had in fact meant something. Humiliated and enraged, Tiffany Hayes did what she did best. She weaponized her platform. That evening, she went live on Instagram to her 2.3 million followers. With expertly produced tears streaming down her face, she spun a lurid tale of betrayal. She painted herself as the devoted girlfriend, blindsided by a ruthless social climbing predator. This woman, she pretended to be a poor, innocent waitress. Tiffany sobbed into her phone's camera. She stalked Richie, found out about his business, and cooked up this elaborate scheme to trick him. She's using her sob story to steal my life. She never used Mirabel's name, but her description was viciously precise. This Polish girl with the thick accent. The internet exploded. The comments section became a cesspool of speculation and vitriol. Within an hour, #WaitressGate was trending. At that exact moment, Mirabel was having a quiet, celebratory dinner with her mother and Catherine at a small, unassuming Polish restaurant in Greenpoint, a place that smelled of home. She felt a profound sense of peace. For the first time, the future felt bright. Then her phone began to buzz, and then Catherine's, and then her mother's with a text from a worried cousin. "Don't look at it," Catherine commanded, her face instantly grim as she scanned a headline on her own screen. "It's a classic smear campaign. She's trying to discredit you before the deal is even announced." But it was too late. Mirabel had already seen it. Billionaire Davenport dumps. Influencer for mystery waitress. Is Davenport Innovations being conned by an immigrant scammer? The joy from her triumph vanished, replaced by a cold dread. Her story was being twisted into something ugly and unrecognizable. "What do we do?" Mirabel asked, her voice trembling for the first time that day. Catherine's eyes were cold as steel. "We do nothing. We remain silent and professional." She took a sip of her wine, her gaze distant. "Tiffany has just handed Mr. Davenport a shovel. Let's see if he uses it to dig his own grave or to build a bridge." The digital firestorm Tiffany ignited was more intense than she could have imagined. By morning, #WaitressGate was the #1 trending topic. Tiffany's tear-streaked, victimized narrative had gone viral, painting Mirabel as a predatory immigrant social climber. The story was seductive, and the internet devoured it. News outlets, smelling blood, began plastering Mirabel's student photo next to paparazzi, shots of Tiffany turning her life into a cheap, ugly soap opera. For Mirabel, the joy of her victory curdled into a familiar, sickening dread. Her phone buzzed with hateful messages. She had fought her way out of the box society had put her in, only to have a new one plastered with lies built around her. In the 45th floor war room of Davenport Innovations, Richard's PR team was in full panic mode. The company's stock was taking a hit, and the board was demanding action. "You have to cut her loose," urged Lena, his head of crisis management. "Issue a statement. Frame it as being misled. Distance yourself from her completely. It's the only way to save your reputation." The room looked at Richard, expecting him to take the pragmatic route. But Richard was thinking of Mirabel's unshakable dignity, of the casual cruelty she had endured, and of his own shameful silence. He had failed her in private. He would not fail her in public. "No," he said, his voice quiet, but laced with cold iron. "I'm not cutting her loose. I'm doing the opposite." He stood, his decision made. "Lena, clear the main atrium. I want a press conference at 2 p.m. Invite everyone. The Wall Street Journal. The gossip blogs, all of them. I want everyone who is writing this story to be in that room." He spent the next few hours not with spin doctors but with his lawyers. He wasn't crafting an excuse. He was accelerating a deal. The due diligence on Nightingale was complete, and it was, in the words of his head engineer, flawless. He instructed his team to finalize the contracts on the terms he'd offered. He was going to turn a PR crisis into a landmark business announcement. He made one final call to Catherine Albright, outlining his plan and making a single, non-negotiable request. At 2 p.m., the atrium was a media circus, a frenzy of camera flashes and shouting reporters anticipating a juicy scandal. Richard Davenport walked onto the stage alone, a figure of calm resolve amidst the chaos. The room fell silent as he stepped to the podium. "Good afternoon," he began. "I'm here to set the record straight. The narrative being promoted by my former girlfriend, Ms. Tiffany Hayes, is a malicious fiction. Our relationship is over, and her portrayal of events is false." A murmur rippled through the crowd. This was not the denial they expected. The truth, he continued, his voice ringing with conviction, is that Ms. Maya Kowalski is a visionary. She is the creator of a platform so revolutionary it will fundamentally change global commerce. She built this while working full-time to support her family and pursuing a double major at university. She did not need to chase my investment. Her genius brought her here on its own merit. He leaned into the microphone, ready to drop his bombshell. "Therefore, I am thrilled to officially announce that Davenport Innovations has acquired a 20% stake in her company Nightingale for the sum of $40 million. The room erupted. The sound of 100 camera shutters clicking at once was like a burst of machine gun fire. This wasn't a scandal. It was an acquisition. A massive one. Richard held up a hand, silencing the chaos. "Furthermore, we will be endowing the new Nightingale Foundation, chaired by Ms. Kowalski, with a $5 million grant to promote ethical practices in technology. We are not being conned. We are honored to be her partners." He then let his corporate mask fall, his expression turning somber. "Finally, regarding the incident at the restaurant, what happened is that my former girlfriend mocked Ms. Kowalski's accent in an act of ugly, classless bigotry. My greatest regret and my personal shame is that in that moment I was silent. For that, I have apologized to Ms. Kowalski privately, and I apologize to her now publicly. Her dignity was absolute. My failure to defend it was a disgrace." The raw honesty of his confession stunned the press into silence. He had taken all the lies and innuendo and incinerated them with the undeniable truth. "Maya Kowalski represents the very best of what this country is supposed to be," he said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "That it doesn't matter where you come from or what accent you have. All that matters is the strength of your character and the power of your ideas." He gestured to the side of the stage. "And now I'd like to introduce you to her." Out walked Catherine Albright, a triumphant glint in her eye. And beside her, walking into the blinding storm of flashes, was Mirabelle. She wore her simple charcoal grey suit like armor, her face a mask of poise and strength. She was not the victim of this story. She was its hero. Richard stepped back from the podium, ceding the stage. Their eyes met for a fleeting second. He gave her a small, respectful nod. She returned it. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was acknowledgement. It was a bridge. Mirabelle stepped up to the microphone. The room was utterly silent, leaning in to hear the voice that had launched 1,000 headlines. She took a deep breath. "Dziękuję, Richard," she said, her Polish thank you clear and proud. She looked out over the sea of faces, her grey eyes steady. "My name is Maya Kowalski. I am the founder of Nightingale." She paused, letting her presence fill the room before delivering her final, definitive statement. "My work speaks for itself. Are there any questions?" Her voice, carrying the very accent Tiffany Hayes had tried to weaponize against her, echoed through the atrium. It was not the sound of a foreigner, or a waitress, or a victim. It was the sound of the future. It was the sound of power. The press conference was a masterstroke. It didn't just end the scandal. It transformed it. Davenport Innovations stock, which had dipped in the morning, skyrocketed, closing the day up 12%. The narrative flipped completely. Mirabelle was no longer the scheming waitress. She was hailed as the Nightingale of Silicon Alley, a tech prodigy and an embodiment of the American dream. Tiffany Hayes, on the other hand, became a pariah. Her brand, built on aspirational luxury, was now tainted with ugly bigotry. She lost sponsors, followers, and her perch in the social stratosphere overnight. Her attempt to ruin Mirabelle had only destroyed herself. In the months that followed, Mirabelle's life changed in every conceivable way. She moved her parents into a comfortable new home with a full-time nurse for her father. Her mother, free from financial worry, began auditing literature courses at Columbia. Her passion for books rekindled. Mirabelle, meanwhile, became the force she was always meant to be. As CEO of Nightingale, she was relentless, brilliant, and fair. She hired a diverse team of the best and brightest, creating a company culture that valued integrity as much as innovation. Her relationship with Richard Davenport evolved into a complex and deeply respectful professional partnership. The apology he had written and the public stand he had taken had laid a new foundation. They worked closely, their weekly strategy meetings, a masterclass in intellectual synergy. The hint of a deeper connection lingered beneath the surface, but both knew that the trust between them had to be earned in boardrooms and business deals long before it could ever be explored elsewhere. The real story was not a romance. It was one of mutual, hard-won respect. Mirabelle's triumph wasn't getting the billionaire. It was becoming his peer. Her value was never in question. It just took a while for the world and for Richard Davenport to see the valuation report. If Mirabelle's story of triumph over prejudice resonated with you, if you believe in the power of dignity and the hidden genius within us, all please show your support by hitting that like button and sharing this video with someone who needs to hear it. Let us know in the comments below if you've ever had a moment where you proved someone's first impression of you wrong. These stories matter, and to make sure you don't miss our next story about the underdog turning the tables, make sure to subscribe and click the notification bell. Because we believe that character, not circumstance, is what truly defines us. Thank you for listening.